Wallace Stevens is a favorite of mine. He was an award-winning poet, a resident of Connecticut, and when he wasn't writing poetry, he was running one of the world's biggest insurance companies, which is, I think, kind of neat. I love this poem because he's talking about how everything seems to be okay, and everything seems to be really predictable and nice, but in reality, accidents do happen. It's called The Pleasures of Merely Circulating. The garden flew round with the angel flew round with the clouds, and the clouds flew round, and the clouds flew round, and the clouds flew round with the clouds. Is there any secret in skulls, the cattle skulls in the woods? Do the drummers in black hoods rumble anything out of their drums? Mrs. Anderson's Swedish baby might well have been German or Spanish, yet that things go round and again go round has, rather, a classical sound. This is not exactly a poem, it's a story by someone that at least one of the person in the room knows, and that's Edward Gorey. That's a real name. And this is a story called The Insect God. And it concerns a little 4-year-old girl who strays away and goes for a walk in the park. And ultimately goes far away. Her name is Millicent Frasley, and it's called The Insect God. Oh, what has become of Millicent Frasley? Is there any hope that she's still alive? Why haven't they found her? It's rather ghastly to think that the child was not yet 5. The dear little thing was last seen playing alone by herself at the edge of the park. There was no one with her to keep her from straying away in the shadows and oncoming dark. Before she could do so, a silent and glittering black motor car drew up where she sat nibbling grass. From within came a nearly inaudible twittering. A tiny green face peered out through the glass. She was ready to flee when the figure beckoned. An arm with 2 elbows held out a tin full of cinnamon balls. She paused. A second arm reached out as she took one and lifted her in. Her nurse was discovered collapsed in some shrubbery, but her reappearance was not much use. Her eyes were askew, her extremities rubbery. Her clothing was stained with a brownish juice. She was questioned in hopes of her answers revealing what had happened. She merely repeatedly said, "I hear them walking about on the ceiling." She had gone irretrievably out of her head. Oh, feelings of horror, resentment, and pity for things which so seldom turn out for the best. The car, unobserved, sped away from the city as the last of the light died out in the west. The Frasleys grew sick with apprehension, which a heavy tea only served to increase. Though they felt it was scarcely genteel to mention the loss of their child, they called in the police. Through unvisited hamlets the car went creeping, with its headlamps unlit and its curtains drawn. Those natives who happened not to be sleeping heard it pass and lay awake till dawn. The police with their torches and notebooks descended on the haunts of the underworld, looking for clues. In spite of their praiseworthy efforts, they ended with nothing at all in the way of news. The car, after hours and hours of travel, arrived at a gate in an endless wall. It rolled up a drive and stopped on the gravel at the foot of a vast and crumbling hall. As the night wore away, hope started to languish and soon was replaced by all manner of fears. The family twisted their fingers in anguish or got them all damp from the flow of their tears. The insects removed the child to the ballroom, whose hangings and mirrors were streaked with a luminous slime. They leapt through the air with buzzings and twangings, to work themselves up to a ritual crime. They stunned her and stripped off her garments, and lastly they stuffed her inside a kind of a pod. And then it was that Millicent Frastley was sacrificed to the insect god. And finally, Dylan Thomas was a very well-known poet in the mid-part of the 20th century. A Welshman. He described himself as a drunkard, a poet, and a Welshman. Often, though, it could be a drunkard, a Welshman, and a poet. Fernhill is about the farm, and you will see that he wrote in a way that the words carry the feeling. Just one little preface. Early in the poem, the third line, there's a word dingle, which is not necessarily a common word here. It means an inlet with high cliffs around it. There's a town in Ireland called Dingle, and the bay that it's on is a narrow bay with high cliffs. So that explains what that word is. Fernhill. Now, as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the Dingle's starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes, and honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. As I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home and the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means, and green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy stream. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hay fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys, it was air and playing, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, and night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm, like a wanderer white with the dew, come back. The cock on his shoulder, it was all shining, it was Adam and Maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light, and the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the windy green stable onto the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced for the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-like days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand and the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sank in my chains like the sea.